In this course, we're going to be starting off with the introduction to what is JavaScript and why do we use JavaScript. What makes JavaScript such a popular programming language. Then we're going to be going over setting up the prerequisite tools for executing and running JavaScript code. You must have also heard about the term called as an ECMAScript. So in this, you're going to be learning what is JavaScript, what is ECMAScript. So that's going to be the first section. Then in the second section, we're going to be learning about variables. What are variables? Why do we use variables? What are the different ways of creating variables? Now we need to keep in mind this is a modern JavaScript level 1 course. There are new features that have been introduced in the language in the recent years. Those new additions will also be taught to you in this particular course. The next section, section 3, is going to be the operators. There are different types of operators. You're going to be learning about the arithmetic operator, the assignment operator, the combined assignment operator. You'll be learning about what is decrement and increment operators. How do you work with the comparison operators and the logical operators? So these are all the things that is going to be covered under the operators section. One thing you have to keep in mind, under every section, there are going to be exercises and assignments and action plans. There's something that I'll always be making you do by the end of the section. The next section happens to be about data types. What are data types and how are they classified? So in JavaScript, you have two different types. You have primitive data types like strings, numbers, boolean, undefined, null. Okay, these are all classified as primitive data types. And then you also have non-primitives, which are called as your object types, where you have array, object, date, and user-defined. So these are all the non-primitive data types. During this particular time, you're going to be learning what are all the methods and properties that are provided to you by the language. And again, there's going to be plenty of exercises that we're going to be doing for you to get in hand and get accustomed to all these things that JavaScript is offering. Next, we're going to be looking at conditional statements like the if statements, the switch, and the ternary operator. So during this time, you'll understand the decision-making part of a program using the if-else or the switch statement. The next section is going to be based on looping, right? What are the different types of loops available, like for loop, while loop. There's a new one introduced in JavaScript. It's called as the for off. There is also a for in loop. Along with that, you're going to be learning about some of the control statements like the break statement and the continue statement. Where, why, what, all these things you're going to be understanding in the level 1 part of the JavaScript course. And under functions, we're going to be learning about what are functions, why do we use functions, what are function declarations. Another way of declaring functions in JavaScript is called as a function expression. Like what are function expressions, how does these two differ, and also a new way of declaring functions in JavaScript, it's called as the arrow function. So that's also something that you're going to be learning as part of the level 1. Now, the idea behind a level 1 course is to ensure that you have a strong foundation on the fundamentals of JavaScript and the working of JavaScript. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in the level 1. In the level 2 course, it's going to be a lot of implementation of the particular knowledge that you would have gained. So you could consider this to be more of an awareness and understanding of the working of JavaScript and what are the tools and techniques available while you're working with JavaScript. That's what you're going to be focused on in the level 1. In the level 2, it's going to be more of an implementation where we go deeper into most of these sections or most of the topics that we would have covered in level 1. We go deeper into it in the level 2 course. All right. So all of you are starting off on a new journey. I wish you all the very best. You have the comment section. You have the discussion forum that is available. Anytime looking at what makes JavaScript the most popular programming language that is out there. The first reason happens to be JavaScript is the programming language for the web. Now, when you take any kind of an application that is there, be it Facebook, Google, Amazon, Flipkart, At the end of the day, when we are using this particular applications, we run it in our browsers. The only programming language that a browser can run currently is JavaScript. Every browser, be it Chrome, Firefox, IE, each of them have a JavaScript interpreter built into it. For example, if you're using Chrome has something called as the V8 engine. Firefox has something called as the Spider Monkey. Internet Explorer, the older version of Internet Explorer had something called as Chakra, but the new version of Internet Explorer, it's called as the IE Edge. They're also using the V8 engine. Google has gone ahead and open sourced that particular project of theirs. So what this basically means is any application that is currently being built, in their front end, it has to be written using JavaScript. That is a very, very powerful thing. JavaScript today is the number one programming language. Now, who says that? Who says that this is the number one programming language? So, there are organizations that you guys would have already heard about, like Stack Overflow, HackerRank, and LinkedIn. Now, what these companies do is on an yearly basis, they conduct a survey among developers and companies, asking them what kind of technologies that they are working on. Now, the second year in succession, JavaScript has emerged as the programmer's choice or the company's choice in using technology for their products. I will share the links for these surveys in the description below. You will be able to go through it in detail. JavaScript, it improves the user's experience on a web page. Now, as I was saying that we're going to be using JavaScript at the front end level, whenever a user interacts with a web page, the user's interactions is handled using JavaScript. Like what? Let's say we click on a link or we request for some information from the server. Let's say I'm on an e-commerce store and I add a product to my cart and I want to increase the quantity of the product in my cart. So what we will do? We will click on the plus icon and then the quantity increases. And at that particular point of time, the quantity value has changed on our UI and also the total of our cart. The values are recalculated and displayed to us on our web page one more time. Now, this behavior that is happening based on a user's interaction, perform some kind of a computation and update the page, it is the work of JavaScript. You need to keep in mind, HTML is providing you the structure for the page. CSS provides you the styling for the page, and it is JavaScript that is adding the behavior to your web pages. Now, JavaScript is not only meant for the browsers or for the front end. Yes, it was true when JavaScript was created many years back. It was first introduced in the year 1995. You can see it's over 2 decades old. It was designed to be a programming language for the web. That is something that is going to be running on the browsers. But today, JavaScript has emerged and evolved itself where we can also use JavaScript outside the browser. So when I say outside the browser, we can actually execute JavaScript on our servers too. Now, this is made possible with the advent of a technology called as Nodejs. Now, what Nodejs allows us to do is Nodejs allows us to run JavaScript outside the browser. The space that was predominantly meant for languages like PHP, Ruby, Python, and Java, because all these are server-side programming languages, even JavaScript has now entered that particular space. Meaning whatever was capable using PHP, we can do the same using JavaScript even on our server side. Of course, none of these run on your browser on the front end, but these are all predominantly server-side programming languages. And JavaScript has entered that particular segment also. Not just that, we can also work with databases using JavaScript today. There are databases of type called as NoSQL databases, and that uses JavaScript as the choice of language. Now, apart from going ahead and building web applications using JavaScript, you as a developer can also use JavaScript for building mobile applications. Now, just think about this, right? You learn the language once, you're able to do front end, you're also able to do the back end of any kind of an application, including the database. Now, with the advent of things like React Native, Angular Ionic, we will now be in a position to write code using JavaScript and export it to be run on an Android phone or an iOS phone. Now, in the past, people had to learn and write code in Java for an Android app. They had to write code in Swift or Objective-C for the iOS app. But now, with JavaScript, people are able to build cross-platform mobile applications that run on Android, iOS, Windows, you name it. Now, similar to that, we can also use JavaScript today for building desktop applications. You can build cross-platform desktop applications using JavaScript. Now, companies like GitHub, they have gone ahead and created a framework that we can use. It's called as the Electron Js. Using Electron Js, we can actually build desktop applications that run on Mac, Windows, Linux. But the programming language here is the same JavaScript that we've been speaking about. Yeah. So now what has happened is JavaScript has emerged as a truly universal programming language. Now, when you have skills of JavaScript, when you learn it once and learn it well, that particular knowledge can be used at multiple different places. Now, if you think from a company perspective, when you start working as developers at organizations in different scales and different sizes, or you might go on to be an entrepreneur, start your own company. When you're building software, you're basically building it for your other customers. And typically, what do they expect? Any application that is out there, you're going to be having a web application or a web interface, you'll be having a mobile interface, or you would be having a desktop interface. And if you learn all of this well, you can actually go on to build multi-platform distributed systems. Now, building all of this is good, but as long as we do not have support in terms of debugging the code while we are writing it, or testing out the code to see whether things are working as expected, it would kind of be a difficult thing. But what JavaScript provides is JavaScript gives you a very good ecosystem of tools for debugging the code. As a software developer, it's a very, very essential thing where when you're building large scale applications, you get stuck somewhere, you need to know where you've gone wrong. Now, there are tools built into Chrome. It's called as the developer tools, Chrome developer tools. That is so easy to debug your code and figure out where things have gone wrong so that you can always go back and rectify those errors and issues. And you can also perform your unit testing, you can perform your functional testing using JavaScript today. Now, these are all the reasons what makes JavaScript to be such a powerful programming language and a language of choice. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to do a little research of find out what are all the companies that are out there currently using JavaScript as their language of choice. And I want you to add it in the comment section below, the companies that you have identified. I'll see you in the next video.